believe this ball game at Shea?
Oh, brother.
3-2 to Mookie Wilson. Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
Glinchey staring in, has his sign. A 2-1 pitch. And a drive in the air to deep right field. That ball headed toward the wall. That ball is out of here! Out of here! A game-winning grand slam home run off the bat of Robin Ventura. Ventura with a grand slam. They're mobbing him before he can get to second base. The Mets have won the ball game. Ventura.
Lopez wants it away.
And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza, and the Mets lead 3-2.
How is New York going to get out of this guy? Their captain, David Wright. He's had the bad back. He's got spinal stenosis. Played less than 40 games in the regular season. It's a cold night. High fly ball to left. Back at the wall, and the captain's going deep to the wall.
It'll be a problem on and off the rest of the season. Turner drives one to center, chasing Nimmo back to the warning track right at the fence. He made the catch! Oh, wow! The catch of the year from Brandon Nimmo! He took a home run away from Justin Turner!
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
And welcome to another episode of the Say Hello podcast. My name is Casey Lynn, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bill Pulsifer, as we are on episode, can you believe this, Bill? Number 7 already. How are you today, Bill?
I'm great. How are you? Good to be back again. It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, good to have you back. We missed you. And, there's always, like I say, so much to talk about with the Mets, regardless of how they're playing and where they are in the standings. We definitely missed you the last couple of weeks, but we have you back right now. And episode 7. So it's amazing how time flies. I just want to thank everybody who's watching on our YouTube channel at Say Hello Media. And also, you can find us on all audio platforms. We are on Spotify. We are on Apple. We are on Google. And the name, type it in, Say Hello Podcast. You can find us there. If you don't want to see our lovely faces, you can just hear us. So with that being said, Bill, we got a lot to talk about today, so let's go right into it. David Stearns, he has been rumored ever since November of, I believe, 2021, when Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, took over control and became the owner, to be the baseball player, president of baseball operations. He is now rumored, it's not official, the Mets haven't announced it, to have now that title. And it's a long time coming. There's a lot that comes with it. It's the first time in Mets history they've actually ever had a POBO, player of baseball operations. I want to get your thoughts on it. I have mine. There's so much surrounding it. But let's get your thoughts first on David Stearns, Milwaukee Brewers GM, then POBO, and now rumored, basically, he is now the new president of baseball operations for the Mets.
Yeah, well, obviously, first things first, a New York guy, so and a Mets fan. So that's something that's nice to know that it's somebody that cares for the organization outside of just the business sense. And obviously, with Mr. Cohen being an owner, obviously a Mets fan as well, it seems like they're kind of bringing the family atmosphere, the fan atmosphere into the organization. Young guy, only 38 years old, but very experienced. Just looking through some of the things he's accomplished, being with the Brewers since 2015 and taking them to, leading them towards into the playoffs 4 times. So has a history already of having some success, albeit in a smaller market. obviously a little less money to be spent in a smaller market like that. So you hope for the best, and I think that the Mets got their man. It's been a long time coming. I think this is who Cohen had on his mind from the very, very beginning. So I guess deal job almost done. It hasn't been announced yet, but they landed the guy they're looking for. So I'm sure everybody in the organization is happy about that.
Well, you touched upon a couple things that let's talk about. First, New York native. It's big because Steve Cohen grew up a Met fan, is a Met fan, and now David Stearns as well. People might say, who cares? They grew up a fan, and it's business. But there's something about that, I think, that means something that you can't really describe. You touched upon another thing. He's young. He went to Harvard. He started right after he graduated Harvard, right into baseball. And funny thing is, the story after he did an internship with the Mets, they didn't hire him full time. I believe he went to Cleveland, then the Astros, then eventually Milwaukee, and he's been in baseball ever since. And you touched upon the biggest thing. Milwaukee did not have and does not have a big payroll. The first 2 years that David Stearns was with Milwaukee as their GM, he had actually, I believe, the lowest payroll in the National League. And they went to the playoffs every year. They went to Game 7 of the NLCS against the Dodgers. They didn't win a couple years ago. And they did this without the resources of what he will have now with Steve Cohen. Obviously money, obviously everything that he will need that he didn't have with the Brewers. He hasn't won anything. And I've skimmed Twitter and the channels, if you will, to see people's lukewarm and initial responses. It's 50-50, Bill. I was expecting, because this has been long rumored for years, and the Mets have, never had a guy who's going to oversee Billy Epler or AKA the GM. And I expected it to be a more welcome response for David Stearns. I'm not really feeling that right now, and I see the reasons. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. He's won. He's gone to the playoffs every year.
Yeah.
Limit with the low payroll.
Right.
I get, he hasn't accomplished winning a World Series. It's really hard to do, but some people are, he hasn't won anything. Analytics are going to be big now with him. He's going to be one of those Harvard, quote unquote, analytical computer guys. So that's what they're saying. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. As a former player like yourself, I don't know how big analytics were back then, but what do you think, as a fan and just your initial reaction hearing the news?
Well, obviously, the game has changed quite a bit. I'm not going to necessarily say for the better or for the worse. We're just going to say different. I would think that there's definitely something to the analytics, and then I think there's got to be something to the eye test as well. So I would suspect that Stearns is aware of this, and I would expect him to surround himself with both kinds of people. Kinds of people that are your quote unquote old school baseball people, as well as your new school guys that are into the crunching of the numbers and telling you, specific ways that the game is looked at now that it wasn't looked at many years ago. Obviously, he's an intelligent man. You don't just fall into Harvard. He's been around a long time, even though he is young. He's dealt with a manager in Craig Counsell, who was a longtime baseball player, who was not a quote unquote superstar, but
great player,
made the very, very best out of what he had when it came talent wise. A guy that I actually came up playing against and always respected as a player. Had that very weird batting stance, but I think that Stearns is going to see the positives in the older school approach as well as the new school approach, and I wouldn't expect for him to go fully analytics for the way the game is played. I don't think that's how the Brewers play the game necessarily. I think that they do, like with the manager that they've had now for years, they do kind of play the game in an older school way, but with the new school knowledge of the way that the game has changed. So I would suspect that he's going to bring a mix. You hope for the best. I think your average fan maybe doesn't look at the president of baseball operations and look at him as the reason for success or not having success. I think it's more looked upon the the manager and the players themselves, and maybe the general manager. So maybe that's part of the reason for the lukewarm response is maybe they don't really know a lot about it. I personally don't know a super bunch about what the president's going to be doing, but obviously he's going to be making the final calls when it comes down to it.
He will make, like you said, the final call. He's over his position oversees Billy Epler. It's no more, Billy Epler who's going to be the final end to it. And that's what Steve Cohen wanted. He thought it was too much for one person like a Billy Epler to take it all on, and he's been open about it. So in that regard, it only can help. And if you remember when Steve Cohen came on, Sandy Alderson did stay. He wasn't the president of baseball operations. He was the quote unquote team president.
Right.
But he stayed on to help Steve, because there was a lot going on at that time when he took over. The only thing that I can pick up, and we'll move on from this, even though it's huge news, but there was a Jeff Passan for ESPN article obviously describing with everything you need to know about David Stearns and the Mets. A long time coming. He said it's the biggest move in the front office since Andrew Friedman went from Tampa Bay to LA as GM to the player of baseball operations. And that was 2014. We're talking a while ago. It's big news. But the only thing that I could think of that kind of makes sense, and we've talked about this till the cows come home, is one of the final paragraphs in his article was the first order of business for David Stearns is going to see the trade market for Pete Alonso. And the fans read that and they didn't like it. And I understand it, and it doesn't mean they're going to trade him. But, I mean, you got to do your due diligence. You got to look around. You wouldn't be doing your job. But I think fans hung on to reading that. And, we can't lose Pete. New guy coming in here is going to get rid of our favorite player. We've talked about this. That's where I think it comes in, where, they're scared that maybe Stearns has his own ideas and he's open to trading Pete Alonso. And before I get your take on that, I disagree, because this year at the trade deadline, there were rumors. We don't know for sure. Rumors are rumors. Clicks are clicks. But there were a lot of reporters, Ken Rosenthal, others, who reported they were in field goal range, Mets and Brewers, of trading Pete Alonso to Milwaukee. Now, if Milwaukee and David Stearns, who was an advisory role this year, wanted Pete Alonso, you would think that David Stearns would want to extend Pete Alonso. So that's all I got, and it makes sense for fans.
Yeah, I think that definitely scares fans when they hear that, somebody like Pete, who kind of the face of the organization, you hear that word trade, and especially the way the seasons went this year and where they're in the standings, it's a shock. But like you said, and we've talked about before, clicks are clicks, and being in the news is being in the news. Like they say, no bad news, no news is bad news, or no bad news is bad news. It's so it's something to talk about. It keeps them in the forefront, and I totally agree with you that if there was interest while he's with the Brewers at this point in time, I don't understand why there wouldn't be interest to keep Pete around. Due diligence is obviously something you gotta see it. You gotta explore every single option, because there might come a time when Pete decides he wants to change his mind. I don't believe that time is now, but if that were to happen, worst thing they would want to do is to have Pete leave without being able to get something back in return. I'm hoping that's not what the case is. I don't believe that's what the case is, but I think that it makes for good news, and it makes for good media, and it keeps the talking points out there.
I think the first order of business, obviously for Stearns, and he's allowed. I think the biggest and the first thing that David Stearns is going to do is have to figure out his coaching staff and his managerial decision. What do you do with Buck Showalter? He's got another year on his contract, and we have no idea. Does a guy come in and clean house? Does a guy? We don't know. We're speculating. So that's huge. And if you remember, 2 weeks ago, the Mets got rid of huge front office personnel, guys who have been in the organization for decades. And when I read that, I mean, that's a telltale sign. If you play poker, Bill, I mean, you're getting rid of guys who've been in the organization for 20 years. That had David Stearns written all over it, and here we are. So I don't know what it means for Buck. I don't know what it means for Jeremy Hefner. It comes down to David Stearns, but there's so many decisions. Pete Alonso, Buck, Showalter, Billy Epler staying, but it's going to be a fascinating offseason. It really is.
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of things to pay attention to. Not to mention, not to leave out the fact that there's going to be a need for starting pitching coming. There's some guys that have had their opportunities this year that have not quite grabbed the bull by the horns, and with some new leadership coming in, I would think that he's going to try to solidify the starting pitching, starting rotation as quickly as possible. I would suspect that Buck's going to get another opportunity. He came off of winning 100 games the year before, and with all the injury troubles, I mean, there was they started the season with 3/5 of their starting rotation, not even in the starting rotation. So that automatically puts you behind the eight ball a little bit. I would suspect that there's probably going to be some changes to the coaching staff.
Yes,
but I think that Buck might get another shot at it. I would believe. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's no telling what could happen at this point.
I'll go 50-50 on Buck. I really, you're right. 101 wins in 2022. This year, Edwin Diaz, before the season started.
Before the season even started.
He wasn't dealt the hand that he was supposed to be dealt. Right. And, we'll see. But again, it'll be a fascinating offseason. And like you said, the rotation for 2024, there's so many arms that are available that really could help the Mets, and Yamamoto in Japan, who just threw a no-hitter, and they had scouts from the Yankees and the Mets and everybody. He's going to win his third consecutive Triple Crown. I mean, Mets are going to be all over him, just like they were Senga. So, I mean, the Mets always are just it's 365 days. Even during the offseason, a hot stove for the Mets is always something, especially this year now with Pete. You got a new president, rotation, a lot of questions. So it will be fascinating.
Bullpen, a lot of things.
Yeah. And that's a good, I meant to bring that up. I was going to do it later, but let's quickly talk about it. You mentioned bullpen. Edwin Diaz. I see videos. I'm sure you do too. They pop up sporadically. There's just about 15 to 20 games left in the season. He's now throwing off a mound. So as a former player coming off an injury, and yes, you had the Tommy John and Diaz tore his knee. What is in the best interest for the player when he's only going to, if he comes back? And we don't know. And that's part of the question. Is it for his mental side that he made it back and he can put that behind him and go into spring training, or is it something else? And you're the perfect person to ask that because the mental side, I think, and I could be wrong, is more imperative than, okay, my slider's still at 92 and my fastball's still at 100.
Right. I'm sure he's chomping at the bit and would love to say that he got back out there and got on the field again before the season was over, regardless of the situation with the team. It's more of a personal thing at that point in time.
Yeah.
Just to say that I'm back and to be able to try to maybe just take a little bit of a sigh of relief to know that, okay, I'm healthy again. Obviously throwing bullpens and throwing simulated games and wherever he's at this point is different than game action in the major leagues. But I think that if he is healthy enough, why not give him an inning or two right at the very end, just to get that mental hump out of the way this year, as opposed to waiting till next year to get out there and get it over with, because then obviously you're going to have those questions going in. I got to wait even longer, because when you get hurt, you're chomping at the bit to try to get back as soon as possible.
Yeah. And even go ahead. No, I was going to say, even if he gets roughed up, who cares?
It doesn't matter. Get out there and pitch.
Right.
Get it done again.
And to wrap it up with Edwin, they did that a couple of years ago, if you remember, with Noah Syndergaard after his Tommy John.
Yep.
He pitched in like one of the final games, and then he took off for obviously another team, but we won't go there.
Right.
But
I would suspect Edwin. I would suspect he might pitch a little bit in winter ball, maybe a little bit. Why not go get a few innings in? He's missed a year. Try to be. I'm sure he's going to be as eager as all get out to come back next year and to be the guy that we know he can be. So the sooner he can get out there, if healthy, obviously you got to be healthy. The sooner he can get out there, the better, I think, for everybody involved.
Absolutely. So, we will monitor that, obviously, and we definitely want to see Edwin back on the mound. I mean,
100%.
who in the hell doesn't want to see, Edwin after that horrible injury? So, moving on, I mentioned that the Mets have about 15 to 20 games left in the 2023 season. Well, I want to bring up the baby Mets, if you will. Let's just talk. We don't, baby Mets, people don't like the term, so we'll say the young prospects.
The young guys, right.
Yeah. And not so much Alvarez. He's locked in for the catcher for the next foreseeable future. I'm talking more Beatty, who obviously went down, came back up, Vientos. Not so much Mauricio, maybe, but let's talk about Beatty and Vientos. Two guys that have been given chances in their very small sample size. But here's the question. Now that the Mets traded all these guys at the deadline and got this influx of talented players from the Astros and Drew Gilbert and Clifford and Acuna for Scherzer and, Jackson for Dom Leone. I mean, Billy Epler did a hell of a job. He really did. And I've been a very long, not a fan of Billy, but props and kudos when due.
Right.
So my question for you is, maybe you experienced this as coming up as a top prospect. There's, in my mind, is there added pressure for Beatty and Vientos, who were the top prospects for sure, but now there's guys on their heels out of nowhere because the Mets made these moves. All the guys that I just mentioned, and they play the kind of the same positions. And Beatty and Vientos have not been really producing, and there's some competition there. So take me through that.
I have been through it a little bit. It was more when I was traded back to the Mets when they brought in Glendon Rush and they brought in left-handed Bobby Jones and they brought me back.
Left-handed Bobby Jones.
Yeah, that's the way we refer to left-handed Bobby Jones. And it gave left-handed Bobby Jones my number when I got traded back. So I have kind of been through it a little bit. I was still young at the time. I was only 24 years old, 25 years old at the time.
Right.
So I have been through it. Obviously, the pressure's there. Funny thing is me and Glendon have actually reconnected a little bit and become closer friends over the last year because of through fantasy camp. And I look back on those times and I was like, man, at one point in time, even though we were, teammates and we were vying for the same spot and we were quote unquote enemies, even though we weren't enemies, it was there's definitely something to that. And I think the pressure of coming up to the major leagues and trying to succeed at the highest level in the sport is difficult enough as it is. And then you add the fact that there's a group of guys that could possibly be playing the same position as you. I think that does put a little bit of added pressure, whether you're putting it on yourself or it's not the organization putting it on you, or whether it is the organization putting it on you. There's definitely something to be said for that. And I think that might have something to do a little bit with them not performing up to what their expectations might be, knowing that there's somebody waiting in the wings and he's going to get that opportunity if you don't take the opportunity.
Yeah, it's crazy because if you remember in the offseason, Beatty didn't think he'd be playing third for the Mets. The Mets had an agreement with Carlos Correa for 12 years. Right. Beatty got his left field glove and that's where he thought he was good. Obviously it didn't happen, but it's kind of ridiculous how all these young players, the Mets have a top farm system now, and now, Beatty and the Vientos, and I really don't know what to make of Mauricio because it's been such a small sample size, but, pressure is a good thing. Competition's a good thing. And it's a good thing to have. Mets didn't have a farm system for years. Now they have actually guys behind guys who are the top prospects. So I don't see anything wrong with it. It can't really hurt. The competition's good for all, I think. It brings out the best.
Well, we hope it brings out the best. But I think the win now situation that the Mets are kind of in now, you're expected to win. I think it might be a little easier for a young player to come up to use Bobby Witt Jr. as an example in Kansas City, where right. That you're gonna get the spot, you're gonna get the at bats, or you're gonna get the ball if you're a pitcher, and you're gonna be able to work through some things. Unfortunately, in New York in this day and age, and really in my day and age too, because the Yankees decided to start winning a World Series pretty much every year. You don't have many offers before they're going to get somebody else in there. So
Yeah.
I guess you kind of get to see what people are made of right away.
So I brought up Ronny Mauricio. Let's talk a little bit about him because one of the other podcasts that we had, we were wondering why in the hell is Ronny Mauricio not up with the Mets? Well, he's been up with the Mets, and ever since he came up, he started every game at second base. He's looked really good. Again, he very short, very small sample size. I get it. But from what I've seen from him, he's a 6'3", switch hitting, lanky guy who obviously he's 22 years old, will put on muscle. They all do. He's looked very sharp at second, where his bugaboo was his defense.
Right.
He's stealing bases. He's getting on base. He's hitting balls hard. His first hit was the hardest hit ball for a Met this season. I've been very impressed by Ronny Mauricio, and it begs the question. We don't have to get into it. Why wasn't he up earlier? Everybody has their own reasons, but I'm very impressed with Ronny Mauricio, and he is up, and that's all that matters. What are your thoughts on Ronny Mauricio?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Long, lanky, lean, wiry, strong right now. Hits from both sides of the plate. He, like you said, he's been very good at second base.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just getting some games. Get him some games and get him comfortable a little bit on the other side of the infield. Obviously, I know they tried the left field thing for a minute, but I like his confidence so far. He's looked confident at the plate. He's looked confident out playing defense and being like he feels like he belongs. And I think it's all positives. Obviously, you'd like to come up and be successful right away, which is a good thing that he's done so far. Leads him into a nice off season where again he's a Latin player, so there's a real good chance at some point in time he's going to be playing some winter ball to continue his development. And all positives for Ronny Mauricio right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. The one thing that we haven't seen as of this recording for the podcast is he hasn't hit a home run yet,
Right.
And that was his spring training 2023. He was hitting bombs. I mean, I watched it. It was like, wow, this little 6'3" guy, not little, but skinny,
Right.
And he's got all this power. So that's going to come. We know.
Well, maybe he's coming in to show that he's a hitter. He's got an approach, and maybe he grows into that a little. That used to be the case where you kind of grew into your home run power and all that. Where I think that maybe we'll use Beatty as an example because we've talked about it before. Where I feel like Beatty hits the ball so well to left center field. Maybe he's gotten up and been told, you got to hit the ball over the right field wall.
Right.
So maybe Ronnie's made the concerted effort to say that I'm a hitter, and we'll worry about hitting home runs maybe next year or in the future.
And we know they're going to come. I mean, because we've seen his power, So I believe he hit 24 in AAA with Syracuse and during spring training.
Had a great year at AAA.
Yeah, and he was the talk of spring training, because he was just hitting home runs left and right. So I'm very impressed with Ronny Mauricio. It's a good thing to have. And, the Mets, again, they have a farm system. And I'd be remiss if I didn't show everybody who's watching. If you're listening on whatever platform, you can't see it. But if you are watching on YouTube, the shirt, bought this right when Steve Cohen became owner. You got to believe in Uncle Stevie. And, he said he wanted a farm system. He wanted to be the LA East. And here we are, with everything we just talked about with David Stearns. And now we're talking about top prospects who got top prospects behind them. So I'd be remiss if I didn't just tell you what I'm wearing with this shirt.
I like it.
So before we go into our mailbag, I wanted to ask you one more question. I have my thoughts on it.
All right.
Like we said, 15 to 20 games left here in the 2023 season. As a player, how hard is it when you're out of competition? I know, unfortunately, you've been on some bad teams. You've been on some good teams. When you're playing out the year and empty ballparks, there's no buzz, and you gotta. As a major league player, I'm sure you don't need that extra oomph to get pumped to put on your spikes. But is there something to it when you made like Lindor? All right, hold on, that's a bad example. He's with all the contract, but whoever. Last year, 101 wins, playoff atmosphere every game, buzz, buzz, buzz. This year, empty crowds, no buzz. It's different. How hard is it as a player to get up for that? Or how different?
It's definitely different, obviously. Knowing that there's going to be 15,000 people in the stands as opposed to 45,000 people in the stands.
Right.
The buzz is obviously different. You hear more of the fans and what is being said in those games than you do when there's 45,000 people in the stadium. Obviously, as a pitcher, you don't get in there on an everyday basis, so I can't say what it's like for an everyday guy. But knowing that you're going to be going out there and facing guys that are Major League Baseball players as well, you better find a way to get ready, or you're gonna be out of there pretty quick, and you're gonna make a fool of yourself. So you find a way to get pumped up for the game itself. But obviously, I don't want to say you go through the motions, because you're never going through the motions. But it's harder to find that extra spark of that competition. Obviously, as professional athletes at the highest level, we find a way to compete with ourselves, even if it's in practice or anything. But it's always a lot more fun to know that you're playing in front of 45,000 screaming fans, and you're playing for something. But you're also a professional, so you've got to go to work every single day and go out there and bust your butt and make sure that you are doing everything you possibly can to try to win a baseball game. And that's the bottom line. It's not easy, but I've been there. I've been there with Milwaukee. You go to work, and you punch the clock, and you give it everything you got. And then, you look forward to it's going to be over soon, and hopefully we can get it going in spring training, because you're always looking forward to that next year that might be the time we get it going.
And for certain players, there are goals that they obviously put out for themselves, like a Lindor, who is close to a 30-30 year, which, is very hard to do. Howard Johnson was the king of that. Lindor has he has a chance. It's an outside chance of a 30-30 season. And, Pete Alonso has a very outside chance. Could happen of 50 home runs. So there are players that have individual goals that they're still playing for.
Absolutely.
So let's get into the mailbag. I love the mailbag. The mailbag, obviously, if you're listening for the first time, on Shay_Hello on Twitter, we always ask if you have questions for the podcast. We put out a tweet, and you can ask whatever you like in terms of Mets baseball, baseball in general. Seems as though all the questions come in for Bill. I understand it. And once again, Bill, they're all for you. So let's get right into them. First question from Jeff Cohen. Mets batters have been hit so many times this year, yet we see no retaliation. Does that come from the manager, or pitchers take it upon themselves to protect themselves?
In my day, it came from everybody. It would come from the manager. It would come from the position players. It would come from the leaders of the veteran pitchers on the pitching staff. It came from everybody. It would be known that we're gonna make a statement tonight, and it's gonna happen. And it didn't have to be said twice.
And I know we talked about this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I know we talked about it. It doesn't make sense for me.
I don't get it.
Yeah, me neither. But it's a good question. But like we talked about for forever, we both don't get it, what the Mets, in terms of retaliation.
Maybe it's a fear of suspensions. I don't know, man. I think at that point in time, who cares, man? There's 26 guys now. There's 26 guys in that clubhouse, and you got to go to battle for those guys. Even if it's not your best friend on the team, it doesn't matter. We're all putting the same uniform on, and we're going to battle. And I know it's not war, and I don't want to make light of that, but it's our battle, and you got to go to battle for your boys.
I totally agree. Let's get to the next question. It's from your buddy NYMGI, who loves.
I knew he'd be there for me.
Yeah, he loves asking Bill his questions.
I must be doing a good job, because he keeps asking. He must like the responses.
He's got a good one for today's episode. Bill, I've noticed you were teammates with Jose Canseco. What was that like?
I thought Jose Canseco was awesome. It was obviously, he's a little older than me, so I was a youngster when he first came up, and getting to say I got to play with a Bash brother was phenomenal. Getting to go out to the bars a few times with Jose Canseco. I always got a great story about Jose Canseco. He used to wear these colored contacts when he would go out. And I was like, Jose, why do you wear the contacts? And he's told me that it doesn't matter what I do or what I say. People will come up to me and say, are you Jose Canseco? And he says, if I tell them no, they'll say, yes, you are. If I tell them, yes, I am Jose Canseco, they'll tell me, no, you're not. So he thought in his own in his own mind that the colored contacts were going to make him not look like Jose Canseco. I always thought it was the funniest thing. I really did.
I guess
but he was a good guy, good teammate. Kind of what you would think a big donkey, but just a good guy. Good guy. Jose was a good guy.
Good. Yeah, that story I could see happening. Just not knowing Jose, but I could totally see it happening because but that's a very good story. So
I was actually sitting in a bar one night with him. I want to say it was in Detroit, and there was a winter home run derby on from Las Vegas, and Rafael Palmeiro and Jose Canseco were in it. So I was actually sitting there watching a home run derby from a wintertime. I don't even know why they did it. Watching it with Jose Canseco. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm sure he could drink. Big dude,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
baseball players, the guys that do, they can
handle they can handle their own.
Yeah.
We'll go to one more question from the mailbag. It's from Steve Jimbod 320. Short question. Bill, did you get a National League championship ring in the 2000 pennant for the Mets?
As a matter of fact, I did. And crazy story is Ricky Henderson was traded during that year, and then he didn't get one.
Really?
And I came back the following year with the Red Sox, and I made sure to find Steve Phillips and find Bobby Valentine to thank them for doing that, because they didn't have to do that. So, yes, I do have a 2000 National League championship ring, yes.
Wow, that's really cool.
It is cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wish you guys won it all, but we won't go there. I remember those games like they were yesterday, and I'd like to have a good night ahead of me, so I don't want to get sad.
There you go.
But that's cool. I'm very happy that you got one because that was a great year. So that will end the segment of the mailbag. Thanks for everybody who chimed in with that. And remember, going forward, you can always ask your questions. Just go to shade_hello, and you can find that and ask Bill all you want. And with that being said, we'll wrap up today's episode with the segment we call Quick Pitches. I know it's Bill's favorite, where we go straight, quick questions for Bill, and he gives us his answers. So, Bill, you ready once again?
I'm ready.
All right. They're off the cuff, as we know, and that's why we love this segment. If you had one superpower to choose, what would it be?
To fly.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd like to be up. I actually have dreams about flying, and they're always some of my favorite dreams. That, and I could sometimes bound like city blocks in one, like I would run on all fours and be able to bound 2-3 city blocks. But flying is always my favorite dreams. So
is that like
I like to fly?
Kind of like Spider-Man, where he's like jumping from building to building.
From building to building. Yeah. But
okay.
I think flying would be cool.
Yeah, I like that answer. I think that would be up there for me as well. Next question. If you weren't growing up and playing baseball your entire life, what was your dream? What would be your dream job other than that? I know baseball was your life back then, but
I tell you, man, when I was growing up, I had one thing on my mind and one thing only, and that was trying to play Major League Baseball. And I was lucky enough to live that dream. I was just thinking about it the other day, though. I'm really into history. So history major, history, a teacher, or I've been really, really into Egypt and Peru and Mexico. So archaeologist. I think archaeologist would be a pretty cool job to do as well, to be able to, find ancient ruins and try to, I believe there's lost civilizations of the past that we don't know about. And I think that looking into those types of things would be a pretty damn cool job.
Yeah, I totally get growing up, and it's all you knew, and being a baseball player, Major League Baseball player, is hard enough. So I feel like you gotta give it everything, So
100%.
But yeah, history, never ends. So
that's it.
That's cool too. Last one. If you were on an island, stranded, and you got the choice of only 3 things that you could have with you, what would they be?
Holy cow.
And keep in mind, you got to live. So,
Well,
but
obviously, is it one? I would need more than one cow because I'd like to be. I have to live, so I got to eat.
fish,
I could fish. Yeah, I guess so.
I'm thinking Castaway. Castaway, he had to learn how to fish and,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Learn how to make fire.
My goodness, 3 things. That's a tough one.
We can make it 1 or 2,
Well, I'd like to have my Xbox so I can play some
Ah,
video games.
I don't know. Right. I don't know if
I'd like
Wi-Fi is
to.
working there.
I'd like to be able to follow baseball a little bit somehow if I was on an island stranded, and
Okay.
obviously I'd like to have my wife and kids with me.
Okay. Well,
That's a tough question.
It is a tough question. So I think we can narrow it down to this: Wi-Fi, because then you get to watch your baseball.
Right.
You could play, Xbox against other.
Right.
I don't know how electricity will work down there or wherever
We'll
you
figure
are.
it out a
but
way.
you figure it out.
Gilligan's Island. You make a stationary bike and you ride a stationary bike to create your with bamboo to make your electricity.
There you go. Well, that's a great way to put a bow on this episode. It was another fun one. I can't believe episode 7's in the books. I want to thank our producer behind the scenes, Steve White. By the way, he has his own podcast. I recommend you check it out. I subscribe to him. It is called the Cold Pop Cast, spelled that way. Check it out, Cold Pop Cast. And
Is it about beer?
actually, it's a channel for current events, technology, and things obviously just happening in the world. And they have a good back and forth about current events and technology and stuff. So if you're into that kind of thing, Cold Popcast.
I'll check it out too.
So thank you, Steve White, our producer behind the scenes. Obviously, thank you, Bill Pulsifer. And I want to thank everybody watching here on YouTube at Shea Hello Media. And if you are listening on any of our platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, that is Shea Hello Podcast. Thank you. Please subscribe if you're watching and follow if you are listening. We would appreciate that. Any final words, Bill?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't get to show my T-shirt off too. I have
please.
a nice, cool T-shirt right here. It's Walter Johnson,
Tuxedo.
The Perfect Tobacco. This is back when you could advertise tobacco as a baseball player, and this is a gift from Chris Vitale. I actually did a couple podcasts with him as well with Ball 9 Sports, and he was nice enough to send me this T-shirt, and I told him I would wear it on the Shea Hello podcast today. But pretty cool little T-shirt right there. So
yeah,
you showed yours. I figured I'd have to show my T-shirt as well.
You got to believe in Uncle Stevie, and that's an old vintage T-shirt you got going on there. So
yes, sir.
I am a fan. So perfect way to wrap it up. Until next week, Bill. Let's see what happens in Mets land, and we'll see. There's always something going on. So thanks again, Bill. Thanks again, Steve, behind the scenes, and thank of course everybody watching and listening to the Shea Hello podcast. Want to wish everybody a great rest of their day, and we'll see you soon.
Take care, everybody.